Welcome to Seeking Numina, the Sacred Places podcast. I'm your host, Elyse Welles, and today I am joined by author Tobias Churton. Tobias Churton is Britain's leading scholar of Western esotericism and a world authority on Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and Rosicrucianism. Holding a master's degree in theology from Brasenose College in Oxford, he was appointed Honorary Fellow of Exeter University in 2005. Author of many books, including Gnostic Philosophy, The Invisible History of the Rosicrucians, The Books of Enoch Revealed, and Aleister Crowley in America, he lives in England, and today we are discussing Celestial Realms, a history of heaven since before the dawn of time. And heaven is a sacred place, and a place that goes much, much, much beyond the limited understanding we think of it as in the West as the Christian heaven or the Abrahamic heaven. And this book is truly a tome. And before we were recording, I loved what you said about your real goal is to just de-obstruct people's understandings of something. And this book really does that. I only received it 2 days ago, and I've already gotten in the, I think, 18 pages I've been able to get through, because then I find the footnotes and then I go into research of what you footnoted. And it is a fantastic exploration on this. So I hope today we can begin to touch on this topic of heaven as a sacred place. Thank you for being here.
Delighted.
Welcome to Seeking Numina. I'm your host, Elyse Welles, and I invite you to connect with the sacred wild within and around you through Numina, or sacred sites around the world, and the wisdom they hold. Together, let's remember the old ways, build relationships with land spirits, and dare to reach out to the fairies. The sacred wild is inviting you to dance in the moonlight. Will you answer their call? So how did you decide to go down this investigation on heaven?
Maybe it's a feature of our times. The news has been so dreadful over the last few years, and for many people very depressing, and made a lot of people feel vulnerable profoundly. And I think that this proximity to death has, I presumed, had altered a lot of people's view about the possibilities of finding ultimate satisfaction in this life alone. And it seemed to me that a book that looked objectively, but also in a personal way too, at every idea of heaven that we have any literal record of, since the earliest possible record. So I wanted to do a book that covered every continent, every culture in every period. So from South America to Alaska to Greenland to Siberia to Central Europe to Nordic countries to Africa to Polynesia to Australia to China to Japan to Indonesia. You name it, it's in the book. And where we have a myth of heaven or hell, underworld or whatever it is, I wanted to do a complete survey. It didn't strike me till later that, as far as I know, such a survey of this kind had never been undertaken. And so, while the material is relatively old, as you can say, it's a new approach, a completely new approach, I think. The original impulse came from when I was in my early 20s, and I was always very struck by Jesus's teaching in the Gospels. I'm not so interested in Book of Revelation or letters of St. Paul, but where you got sort of close, perhaps in some passages, to Jesus' actual thinking, this whole notion of the kingdom of heaven is within you or among you, or it's not it's necessarily up there, but it's a personal experience. That whole scheme, which had made an impact on John Lennon particularly, and obviously the 60s, that inner searching had it was possible, and the whole interest in psychedelics, and whether the kingdom was an experience, a state of being, state of mind. Was it something that was stimulated by this or that? That was my original book, because I wanted to understand Jesus' teaching about heaven. And I never really got round to it, but everything I've done in a way is to do with that. So I did want to go back to that with all the years' experience I've had and all the knowledge, such as it is, that I've gotten throughout it. And then I thought, well, I can't just leave it at that. We got to cover everything. So yeah, there's a chapter on the Quran. There's chapters on Renaissance, occultism, mysticism, Kabbalah, everything. I mean, it's. I won't say it was endless, but I mean the possibilities have been endless. I think. I find the book enlightening, even reading it myself, because when you're writing it, you're getting input. It goes down, you edit it, you read it, but you don't always realize how profound some things that there are there because you're too involved. It's like a good painter should never remember his best strokes. They should be the ones that happen in process. So I was struck by there's a lot of droplets from the inspiration tree were coming thick and fast at certain points. I was really happy to do Plato finally, and really put it in a nutshell the Platonic doctrines that you find in the Phaedrus and the Phaedo and the Symposium, and get that sorted out. A lot of things became very clear to me. For example, what is the holy guardian angel? This is a famous line from the tradition of the Order of the Golden Dawn, thanks to Samuel Mathers, and it's entered into 20th century magic well, Aleister Crowley would say it was the first goal of the adept is to obtain knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. And I was able at last to penetrate the miasma around that subject and get down to what we're talking about with that was a great moment. It's a tiny part of the book, but it was one of those for me made it particularly special. I could see the continent clearly, the mist cleared, and that was good. And it was great to pass that on and the detailed texts on which it's all based. So yeah, it was and then I also wanted to also other kinds of fake heaven or manufactured heavens like there's a chapter called Communist Heaven versus Roman Catholic Heaven, which I think has been one of the debates of the century. It, not debated necessarily in nice debating chambers, but debated with guns and prisons and oppression and mass persecution in a way we perhaps have never seen since the Reformation period. Um, so that old idea of people wanting to build heaven on earth politically with some doctor, I wanted to do that, and also look at things like John Lennon's lyric that is heard by so many people. Imagine there's no heaven, and I wanted to take John to task on that one. Although I don't think if he was still alive, he'd need to be, because I think he'd already by 1980, he'd probably thought, I bet he winced when he heard that in later years. I mean, the music's very beautiful indeed, and the recording is super special, but the lyrics are so irritating when you look at the context, which was him trying to please Tariq Ali and the left wing Trotskyites of the London School of Economics. But it's had a huge influence, and yet it's the most absurd idea. It takes more imagination to believe there is a heaven. It takes no imagination at all to look at the sky and say, "Well, that's it." I look up at the sky and I think, "Well, that's the sky." I don't dream of heaven because I'm looking at clouds or blueness, and I think the sky is symbolic, but it's certainly not where I would look to for heaven. And anyway, the word heaven, as we've inherited it from Greek and in our culture, just simply means whatever's up and around us, Uranos, the cosmos. It's just that we've managed to extract divinity from it through our science, insofar as the more our telescopes penetrate the physical nature of the cosmos, the less possibility there seems to be, visually anyway, for the kind of ordered universe that was believed in and calculated upon in our to our ancient forebears, and in fact very recent forebears. We're sort of stuck with a world drained of heaven. So huge dimensions to this thing. I want it's obvious to me, and maybe well to some people, that without some sort of transcendent dimension, this life is pretty frustrating, would be the very least one could say about it. And moving on to, uh, unbearable. If you've ever met people who suffer from serious depression, very often what's lacking, the light's gone out, of their lives. It's all become, there is no transcendent dimension, and they may not have any hope for it.
And would that be perhaps if somebody asked for a synonym for heaven in your definition, as you explore this in this book, would that be perhaps the definition there that you would use, that it's the transcendent dimension?
Yes, I think if what the word would mean to me, and would make sense to describe it in terms of, yes, I think it's the transcending dimension. It. What's the old Jewish phrase? They always say that oh, it's like the world beyond, or the world to come. It's something like that. It's something with the wind that's not really quite here, but uh, it's an immanent possibility. Yeah. You can approach this from either believing it, or you can be skeptical, and depart. I was thinking, I'm also concerned about people who, and I'm one of them, who's lost loved ones, and you just don't know. I meet a lot of people who say, I know they're looking down on me. I know they're present, and I'm with them, and I'm very, very sympathetic to that feeling. I don't personally have it very much, and I'm. It seemed to me that when people I've loved have gone, they seem very much a gulf apart, and so there is that very personal aspect as well. It's not just about whether this world becomes more meaningful if there is a transcendent dimension or spirit, an overarching spiritual truth that transcends the material and corruptible and changeable universe. I think we need to know, we need some security about our ancestors. Our actual ancestors didn't have the kind of problem that we had. They went to the underworld, and you could perhaps have some sort of communication with them maybe once a year, or you might catch the shade in the house. In the ancient Romans would have a statue of their ancestors, which they venerated, and it was believed that the spirit of the ancestors would occasionally be manifest. And you went down to the grave of your family, and you left them food or drink or poured wine, and that's pretty universal right around the world. That was another thing about the book I found, that no matter what, practically every culture had an idea of heaven, and many of them have extraordinary number of things in common. Not all the same, but enough to this is a belief and a series of mythological types that absolutely transcend culture and religion. It's universally diffused unless it's trodden on, or when sometimes has happened, people lose their basic faith. They felt overwhelmed by powers from outside, and they lose the vision. So that was delightful. Never mind that. And also some of the myths that we associate, like the flood. Amazing that you've got flood stories with a couple going in a boat or something and going to a mountain all across east, south, north, west. Amazing. So the scientists will tell you, well, it's probably based on a big flood that happened with the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia. But the fact that the flood stories are so diverse does make you wonder about whether there was ever once an even more unthinkable catastrophe that would overwhelm so many, or it was that we were all once living on a landmass, as it were, and those land masses have become separate. That's another possibility. But certainly, you've got to take heaven seriously. And the funny thing is a lot of religion, oddly enough, doesn't. If they did, they wouldn't talk such simplistic nonsense about it. You need to ask some very penetrating questions. If there's to be a new heaven and a new earth, I think it will be because we think about these things differently. And when we start to think about heaven and earth in a new way, then a new heaven and a new earth. I think we've almost got a new heaven anyway, but it's kind of unfinished work. I mean, seriously, the I'm talking about the outer cosmos. That we have a new cosmos there for sure, certainly in the last century. Um, Something unexpected, which new things should be unexpected. And we have a new Earth in many respects. Oh, we certainly see it differently. Nobody who saw the Earth from space that were taken at Apollo 8, those wonderful photographs back in '68, suddenly seeing that the world wasn't a sort of grey football, which it was thought to be in World War II, but it's a beautiful milky blue balloon that it seems remarkably pure considering the uh, disgusting things that go on the surface of it. But then you realize, like I said, never judge things by the surface. And the earth certainly can't be judged that way. And I think a lot of people talk about the earth entirely from their immediate experience or what they get through television. Television is nothing, but it has changed people's vision of the earth. I think in many ways, not a particularly interesting way.
Yeah,
You're always up against the limitations of your journalist who stands in the way of you and the cosmos, as politicians do. They usurp the position of ordinary people. You can't see, you have to be told. You
exactly.
can't
It becomes
trust, you can't
passive.
trust these, you must trust that.
Yes, externalized and passive.
Yeah.
And
So,
it's
yeah.
non-experiential. I mean, of course, that's the inverse of passive, but it is also, I think heaven is meant to be experienced and understood from a place of experience.
Well,
Um,
Jakob Burma certainly thought so, yeah.
and
There's one, do you know Jakob Burma's work? Are you
no,
familiar?
no.
He was a German shoemaker mystic. I think he wasn't just some humble cobbler with his last. I think he had a shoe business in Görlitz in Upper Lusatia in Germany. He was born, well, he died in 1624. He was born in the late 16th century. He was very much oppressed by the local council and his town of Görlitz. But he was able to publish one book before they forbade him to publish. And that book was called Aurora, but he wrote many other things which were published after his death. One of his works, he's a kind of not he's a Gnostic, really. He's hugely influential on, I can't tell you the range of influence he's had for a self-taught man, quite incredible. But very much influenced by Paracelsus. And in one of his dialogues, someone says, well, where do you go? Where do you go, when you die? And the interlocutor in this dialogue says, you don't go anywhere. You are not no longer in the dimension of time and space, but you don't go anywhere. There ain't any, there's no, if in a dimension without time and space, you don't need to go. You will be in the state of spirit which you were at that point, and that will determine how you perceive or are aware of whatever environment you're in. Now, that strikes me as very sensible. A person incapable of beholding beauty, truth, goodness is going to find it's going to be hell because they won't be able to relate. But if you are in a state, this is what Jacob Burma is saying, if you have followed the right path, you will know where you are, and there's no need to go anywhere. So he, even in that time, a self-taught man in Germany in 1620 already had the notion that heaven wasn't simply you went in an upwards trajectory and you're going to get there if you keep going in a vertical direction, which people had for so many years. But he'd already realized that we are talking about, and he'd got it from the gospel tradition, that this idea of heaven is where God is. It's where the absolute is. It's where the spirit reigns. And we shouldn't think of it really necessarily as a place. But then you have statements in the Bible like, my father's house has many mansions. In other words, there's something, I like to think there's something for everybody. And at a level, this is me purely speculating, and the people find their own level in this experience of heaven. But it should start now, I think. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise. All we myths are there to encode experiences. If you don't have the same experience as the writer of the myth, don't be surprised if you find the myth is absurd. If you resonate with certain myths, then those will become more real to you. So people will choose the myths that they like, and for some it'll be of one kind or another. And I think one of the things the book does is open your mind to the range of possibilities, while retaining the notion that uh, ultimately we are talking about a mystery,
Yeah.
which partly transcends us and part of which can be accessed.
And I think with all sacred places, heaven's the inverse of most of the sacred places we speak about on this podcast. I had on um, an author Brett Hollyhead, who wrote a book about the river Severn and the goddess Sabrina, and the different cultures that have connected to that river as a sacred place. The Romans had a different perspective on what that river meant than the natives of Qumru that they came across. And of course, today, a visitor who maybe they're not even conscious what river they're on, they all could have stood at that exact place, and no one could have denied that they were on that land, but each of them experienced a completely different place. And I think when we speak about the transcendent dimensions that we can access, call it heaven, it's the same thing. I really like that. I think I saw him in your Paracelsus chapter. I'm a big fan of Paracelsus. So I'm excited to read more about Jacob
Well,
Boehme
he saw the heaven
that.
in the natural world, in the world around him. He saw this relationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm. So the ultimate reality has its signatures, as he called them, signatures in nature, and there are real correspondences between the planet. His whole thing was how to unite the macrocosm with the microcosm and become a healthier, more conscious person, cosmic consciousness, you could call it. And this for him was the key to a full health. It's always spiritual health, and for him it was a kind of constant rebirth process. That's Paracelsus, the great medical pioneer. Um, I remember that we've got a chapter on Celtic myths that are always very interesting and terribly positive. I mean, wonderful what we know of the, because of course the Celts didn't write these things down. There are myths that have been carried on much later. But I think the Celtic myths appeal to people today in the sort of post-psychedelic or well, maybe it's still psychedelic era underground. It's still people are still, as John Lennon once put it, they're still visiting the cosmos. Um, so yeah, all that there are certain places where you can be particularly turned on to this, whatever you want to call it. I have I've found quite a few in my life, a few, but very resonant. I mean, I met an Undine in in Languedoc in 1987. That was pretty damn amazing. Uh, you know, but
I I'd love to hear
Paracelsus.
that story if you wanted to share that. Yeah, the water spirits.
Yeah, she was amazing. I went back to see her, and she, I couldn't tell whether she was there or not the next time, and that was about 3 or 4 years later. It was a, but they'd built around the land. It was very interesting. It was a very, very beautiful. I didn't really want to name the name because I don't. It's my thing. And the last time I went back there, they'd built houses near what had been a complete. I'd found it with a friend, and it was through brambles and it was between Narbonne and Carcassonne, more or less, is all I'm going to say. And a very obscure part of the mountains. And I just had this feeling we were walking on a very narrow lane. And I said, something I've got to get, we got to go there. And we went through. And my friend who was German said, oh, this is so brambly, I can't get there. You know. I said, just trust me. And we come through this into slight clearing and look down, and there's a small river, rivulet, stream, really, stream. But if you got into it, it'd probably be up to about your, chest. And I said, God, this is amazing. And he went and sat on a rock. It was a beautiful hot afternoon, and I just took my clothes off and got in the water. And geez, it was like I was being caressed. Amazing. And I and I remember saying to Heinz, I said, Heinz, can't you feel this? What were you talking? Nice day, They're amazing. But and I remember saying that to say to this being in the water, I will I want to visit you again, and I hope when I leave you'll come to me in my dreams. And I'm not talking erotic dreams. I just there was something wonderful. And because Paracelsus, again, he talked about the spirits of nature, didn't he? The undine, the gnome, who were the air spirits. What did he call the air spirits?
The sylphs.
Oh, yes, the sylphs. So and the spirit of fire is the
Salamanders, but
salamanders, of course. Yeah.
yeah, which I think is just because of they believed maybe that salamander fluid could help you be
Mm.
fire resistant. That's been some of my study on why that might have been.
Yeah. But anyway, whatever he really meant by these, I think he probably spoke from experience. And I
Yeah.
was lucky enough to have that particular experience. But I've been to other places which are gateways, no doubt they're gateways. And you find this in all the old myths again, that there are these places where they said that's the gateway to the underworld. Well, often some of it was pretty obvious. It was in Greece, you talked about earlier. You get a crack in the rock and you've got some volcanic activity and you see smoke. Well, of course, they would say this is the underworld. You could hardly not think so. Um, and so people had a very vivid idea about these places. As I say, our ancient forebears had no problem. They didn't have to believe in heaven. They could see it every single day. There it was. And at night they got the stars, the watchers, as the Hebrews called them, watching, which were all angels or daimons, if you use the Greek. Um, and the whole world was permeated by these spiritual presences. And we've kind of vacuumed all this up, haven't we? Our materialism has evaporated all these spiritual dimensions. And I believe they're still accessible, but
Yeah.
it's getting damned hard.
Well, and
They,
it's we have such a literalism today. I'll make a post about, something very, very obviously poetic or metaphorical, and people will say, "Oh, you literally believe that this is that?" I said, "No, this is a poem." Like it's very strange the way people
well, that's
take in
materialism.
information.
That's
Yes,
materialism, is
yes.
that a word has to denote a concrete thing.
And I'm hoping
But
that we're going back around. Maybe the Ouroboros will eat its tail because our ancestors, as you just shared, were actually quite literal. The stars are the heavens. End of story.
but they
Inanna
weren't
is
only
in
they weren't
this.
only literal. They lived in different worlds. Um, I mean, I think to the Semitic mind, and I mean the word Semitic in its proper usage, which would include the Arabs and most peoples living west of the Euphrates, nomadic tribes, of which some were children of Israel. To the Semitic mind, they were, and it still obtains, they are in God. The world is like God. It is the world. That's the world. They can't why should they? They can't separate the divinity from the world they're living in. So they're and yet they're perfectly able to function with ordinary assumptions about gravity, space, time, and enjoy material objects, and as they've always done, and always as people always will. Oh, that was another thing in that John Lennon song I really hated. Imagine no possessions.
Mm.
I just thought, tell that to the squirrel. Or,
Yeah.
you know, every animal is aware of its territory and the things that are its, and will fight to defend them. And we're no different to that. Absurd notion that yeah, you couldn't live without possession. Okay, you can be obsessed with possessions. You can be obsessed. Anyway, I
It's
don't mean to say
extremity.
this. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't mean to say this against John because I know anyway that he revised many of these views, and anything he wrote about or sang about was only what he was thinking at the time, and he reserved the right to change his mind, as I do, and everyone should. It's terrible when people bring something up that somebody said in the past that they might think better of today. You know, it's better that a lot of things aren't recorded, because
Yeah.
who wants to be reminded? It's bad enough lying in the morning and thinking all the mistakes you've made in your life, and you think, geez, I'm reminding myself, why am I doing this? I feel worse so much, I can't change things. Well, I can learn perhaps from them, but if you haven't learned by now, you probably never will. But yeah, I think all these questions of heaven and holy places and our true destiny crystallize so many other issues of our lives, that it seemed to me that the book would be a good I'm trying to think of the word, something you put in it and it changes. Catalyst.
Catalyst.
Yeah. I wanted the book to be a catalyst for people's thoughts and expectations. And because everyone's different, they will catch certain things at certain times. Don't as any decent work, don't expect the light to go on immediately. You know, um, or it might. I hear things about that, but there is enough in this, I believe, for all tastes,
Yes, absolutely. And I think
aspirations. Yeah.
and that's what I like about this book as well is I do intend to read it cover to cover, but it also is one that will become a reference book more in the future for myself because it's something
Yeah,
that,
it will function as that because the material is
yeah,
solid. It's solidly based. So yes, there's no reason why it shouldn't be. There's no reason why you have to read it from left to right, but beginning to end. You might flick and see, oh, that I'm interested in. That will then, and you can approach it that way. I don't. That's all right.
and you've got a
Um,
very good index. Some books neglect the index.
well, I did the index.
I
You see, I always
oh, I love
insist.
it.
I got sick of the indexes that were being done for me, partly because I'm expected to pay for them, but mostly because they're totally inadequate. They're done by some algorithm. So you get totally irrelevant things taking up space that you don't need. I always think, well, what do I want from an index? What do I need to know? And you should be able to get a lot from an index. And I've seen so many books published today where the index wouldn't even give you a true idea of the contents.
Yes,
Um, a
yes.
good index,
I
no,
notice it too. When I
yeah,
get a new book, the first thing I do is go to the back, see the index, read the bibliography, see who they've cited, and then certain books, yours is so comprehensive it wasn't as necessary, but some books I'll read their conclusion first, then
right.
go back and read the introduction, um, because
But they've
those are
done a
that's the
wonderful
means.
book. the publishers have done the most beautiful job with this particular book. I've never had a book that was all full color illustrations all the way through,
I was
and the
gonna say
print.
that is a surprise. They're
Oh,
just stunningly
I
done.
I love her. She's great. I mean, yeah.
They're
I
all,
mean, yeah, beautifully done, and the quality of the size of the font. It's a pleasure to handle. I love the paper. Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's it's
it is. It's heavy. It truly, when I received it in the mail, I didn't know it was just one book because I was like, I thought I only requested one.
Well,
It's a
I
tome.
tried to keep to the. They give me nowadays. I have to. I'm supposed to write every book's supposed to be of the same length, believe it or not, because of the margins are so tight with publishing these days. And in the old days, I just wrote and nobody minded. I mean, most of
Yeah.
my books were tomes. 600 pages was sort of normal. Now I'm very much under a limit, so. It's a good discipline, but I don't get to be so self-indulgent with my language as I would like. There are times when I feel the urge to be more poetic and more like the kind of writing that I grew up with, which was mostly pre-1900. And those opportunities are few. But I think with the passage of time, you do become succinct, but there's always danger of becoming terse.
Mm.
And um, I think, how can I say? I didn't feel reading this one that it suffered from length issues. I'd had to edit it down where I felt the meat of it was gone or anything like that. It worked out. It worked out well. I like the feel and length of it, and I normally can't bear to even to see my books when they come out. Because I can't even face them till about 2 years later. I don't know why. I get no satisfaction on publication day. It's weird. The biggest satisfaction I get is finishing a book because it's like this huge burden is finally off my shoulders. And then it comes back the next year when you edit it. And then there's a long process before it finally comes out. And by the time it comes out, it's like, oh, don't tell me about that. The
Yeah.
only pleasure, the only possibility of any kind of satisfaction from a book is when I talk to you or somebody says they've read it or they liked something about it. And then, and then I remember why I did it because it's your reaction that matters, not mine.
This is
Yeah.
very validating for me. I had two books come out last year. One of them was a novel that I had finished, completed, sent manuscripts in 2021. And the novelization process, like fiction publishing, is much longer. And so by the time I actually read the final edits, it was 2024. And I was feeling the same way. I was like, wow, this is a pretty good story. Wow, these
Yes,
characters. What's next?
finally
Oh, that's right.
reconciled to it. Yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
finally could enjoy it. But
Yeah.
then by the time publication day came around, I was the same way. I was like, oh, good, it's out. Moving on. I'm working on
Hmm.
6 manuscripts right now, like an absolute mad
Goodness
woman.
gracious. I don't
But
know how you can manage it. I
yeah,
find
they're scaffolded.
one a year is quite enough for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some of them are finished and, in edit mode and in pause, and things like that. But well, thank you so much for joining me here in Seeking Numina, the Sacred Places podcast. Listeners can get Celestial Realms anywhere books are sold. Is there anywhere particular that you'll be doing any events online or in person? This episode will come out in the summer, probably in June or July. Is there
Well,
anything coming up?
this is the kind of event I'm now tuned into. But no, no, no. I like the podcast thing because you're reaching people in their out of their real interest. You
Yeah.
know, you're meeting their interest, I hope.
Yes, definitely. And I really appreciate you coming on the show because uh, this is something of interest to a lot of people. And I'll let you know how it does as well. Maybe we'll have you back to talk more about because there's plenty to talk about in the realms of the celestial.
Yeah, it's been difficult for me to talk about because it's always difficult to talk about your work, I find, except when I'm writing it. Then I'd like to talk about it because I've got issues I'd like to bounce off. But afterwards, I find it very difficult. The book is the book. I've put everything into it. There it is. It's for you, and it really is for you. It's not for me. So it's at a remove. If people have particular questions that arise from the book, that we can sort of discuss,
All
that
right.
sort of thing. But I'd be very happy to come on your pagan show again anytime. And I presume it's sort of paganish, is it?
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that word for myself. I have a pretty diverse audience, but yeah, definitely open-minded practitioners. That's a way to say it.
I like it. Yes. Well, pagan means country dweller, which is what I am, and
Yes,
it's
exactly. That's why I love the word for myself, because I could be called many things.
close to nature. Yes.
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 Thank you for seeking Numina with me today. Join me at patreon.com/Elyse Welles to support this show and get access to a library of rituals, exclusive videos, meditations, and more. To learn more about my upcoming retreats, book a tarot reading, or learn with me in workshops, classes, or mentorship, visit seekingnumina.com.